This is The Wire for 2300 Zulu, December 9th, 2025. Precedence is routine. Information cutoff is 2200. Bottom line up front. Conflict continues in Asia. High-profile migrant crimes increase tensions in the United Kingdom. One student killed in stabbing at North Carolina high school. Shooting reported at Kentucky State University. Beginning with international events, in Southeast Asia, the war between Thailand and Cambodia continues as before, with a few escalations of the conflict occurring overnight. Cambodia has continued rocket attacks, and Thailand has continued shelling random locations in the disputed border region. Thailand struck a few cultural sites and temples in Cambodia yesterday afternoon, with Thai forces also deploying some armored units to the Cambodian side of the border. Analysts comment. At the moment, this is a continuation of the same style of warfare that is often common throughout the Third World, both sides conducting massive airstrikes and bombing campaigns, but very few casualties being the result. This is basically an international slap fight where the only real casualties are civilians, which have far outweighed the casualties sustained by combatants on either side so far. Despite the very low ratio of combat deaths to munitions dropped, the fighting this time around is more intense than when the conflict flared up a few months ago, so this conflict does have the potential to get more serious as time goes on. In the United Kingdom, tensions remain palpably high following over a dozen high-profile migrant crimes coming to light over the past few days. In the Midlands, 2 Afghans were convicted of brutally assaulting a 15-year-old in a public park in an incident which the authorities have openly admitted to covering up due to civil unrest potential. The suspect's own defense attorney stated that if the video of their attack were to be made public, it would spark a riot. Separately, a different Afghan migrant identified as Sultani Bakatash assaulted 2 girls in Manchester a few days ago. Analysts comment. Over the weekend, it was also discovered that the wife and children of the current leader of ISIS in Somalia lives in taxpayer-funded housing in Slough, which has inflamed tensions further. Abdul Qadir Mumin was known for encouraging terrorism throughout the UK before fleeing to Somalia around a decade ago, leaving his wife and children behind while he wages jihad with about 1,000 fighters in Somalia. Mumin was, and still is, a highly sought target, who the United States has conducted kinetic strikes on several times. Back in 2024, there was speculation that he was killed during a strike in Somalia, however this has been proven to be incorrect over time, and his official status remains unknown. This is why there is outrage over this case. This guy is not an ordinary street fighter, he's the actual leader of the ISIS branch for Somalia. The family members that remain in taxpayer-funded housing actually knew of his terrorism-encouraging speeches. He was legendary for these talks before he fled the country. He escaped to Somalia, but his family stayed behind in the UK to receive benefits. On the home front, in Georgia, State Representative Sharon Henderson was arrested and indicted on charges of fraud pertaining to her activities during the COVID era. Representative Henderson is accused of falsifying her employment status so as to obtain special benefits that were made available to those who were forced out of a job due to COVID. In order to get these benefits, she allegedly claimed to be a schoolteacher after actually leaving the job to campaign for the seat that she currently occupies. In North Carolina this afternoon, a stabbing was reported at North Forsyth High School, which prompted a lockdown of the local area. Concerning casualties, 1 student was killed in the attack. Analysts comment. At the time of this report, this is a developing story, so the details will change. Right now, it looks like this might have been a personal dispute and/or gang activity. Though very unconfirmed at this time, some photos have circulated social media, which are screenshots of a video depicting the incident. The photos indicate this murder took place as a result of a fight between students. In Illinois, this morning an ICE raid was reported in Elion, which rapidly deteriorated into a state of chaos. ICE personnel were targeting a high-value individual, or HVI, by the name of Jesus Acosta Gutierrez, a local TDA affiliate. During the raid, a large crowd formed and caused a riot during the arrest. Analysts comment. The suspect was eventually captured, however this was one of the more kinetic arrests in the area. The key takeaway from this incident is that, per local reports, activists were on scene to the site of the raid before ICE agents had even arrived themselves. This confirms that the DHS continues to have intelligence leaks which impact operations. This is not the first time this has happened in this specific area due to extremely lax operational security or OPSEC by some of the people who have knowledge of impending operations, which has become common in most states ICE has conducted operations in so far. In Kentucky, this afternoon a shooting was reported at Kentucky State University. 3 people were wounded during the attack, with 1 possible fatality being reported as well. The shooter was detained at the scene and has not yet been identified. Analysts comment. This incident was first described as an active shooter situation, however, as the situation developed, this appears to be more of a general crime incident and not a deliberate or targeted mass shooting attempt. Analyst comments for this wire. As it is relevant to the stories that have been popping up in the UK and the US over the past few weeks, a very specific bit of back pocket knowledge is helpful for rounding out the context of what's going on. In many cases, the individuals who are committing these horrific crimes are self-described teenagers, when in reality they are full-grown adult men. Age discrepancies are no excuse to commit horrific crimes. However, in most justice systems around the world, juveniles get a lighter sentence. And since the migrants have no identity documents to prove their age, the British government simply takes them at their word. So a very obviously 30-year-old man becomes a 17-year-old so as to avoid a harsher sentence. This mentality is also used to sometimes gain access to children in the first place. Oftentimes this is the scenario. We hear about a high school student being arrested for some horrific crime. The mugshot comes out and the internet collectively thinks, that guy is a little old to be in high school. In most cases, this is a correct assessment. The initial birth certificate documents that migrants claim to have are incredibly easy to fake. This is an extremely common tactic that is used around the Western world, from H-1Bs in the US to migrants from Northern Africa making their way into the United Kingdom. There are now a whole lot of mugshots that allegedly depict a juvenile, when in reality it's just an adult man who is lying, because the procedures to verify one's identity are completely non-existent when it comes to mass migration. In the context of the Midlands attack, one of the Afghans convicted of the crime pled guilty one single day before he turned 17, and thus will escape both adult charges and deportation. Despite the prevalence of this tactic being used, it's incredibly easy to prove either way. The exact age of a suspect can easily and quickly be identified with a simple X-ray of the hand and wrist. The Tanner Whitehouse 2 or TW2 method is a non-invasive way for a radiologist to determine with shocking accuracy the exact age of a child based on the development of bones in the hand. By the time a person is a fully grown adult, i.e. not a juvenile, the bones are fully formed and thus very apparent on the X-ray. This method won't work that well for someone trying to slide in under the line by pretending to be 17 years and 364 days old to avoid adult charges, but it will certainly work to pick out the 40-year-old man from a high school classroom. Despite how well this works for this task, this method is not really used in the criminal justice field except in extreme cases where the suspect is very obviously lying, as opposed to more believable lies which, if noticed, are usually conveniently ignored. Even in the best cases, it's circumstantial, so this bone analysis is not usually conducted at all. All in all, this might help explain why some rather interesting mugshots keep popping up in both the United Kingdom and the United States. This concludes The Wire for 2300 Zulu, December 9th, 2025.